Welcome to Muslim Apologetics Australia. How you doing? I hope you're doing well. Well, you've seen my video. If you haven't, look at the description section. We've already done a video on Christchurch and exposed the right for fundamentally radicalizing that Brendan Tarrant guy who went out and committed that massacre at the mosque. And so basically we showed the signs of radicalization and how he got to where he is today. And so it's been about a week or so since the atrocity has taken place, and many politicians have now come out and spoken about it. There is a campaign out there to obviously silence hate speech. And we've seen so many commentators come forward. We've seen people from the left. We've seen people from the right. And so what I want to do is I want to take you through some of the things that I've seen and heard and express them and respond to them in this video response. And so please do watch the video if you haven't seen it. And I'll put a description below. The video I've done on Christchurch. And so this will be a continuation in responding to some of the things that I've seen and heard, which is incredibly interesting. So this video will respond to things such as freedom of speech. Some of these anti-Islamists are saying, oh, you're trying to shut down freedom of speech. You Muslims are just playing the sympathy cards. And so in order to silence those who want to critique Islam. And then you have other active movements out there claiming there is no real connection between radicalization of, Brendan Tarrant and some of the speakers out there such as Milo or, Pauline Hanson or say, all of these other think tanks, whether it's Senator Fraser Anning or perhaps the Murdoch press. And I want to go through some of the bizarre comments I've heard and the hypocrisy, the absolute hypocrisy of some of the things those on the right say. We'll also go through the responses of what Jacinta did. Some of the things that Jacinta did, the president of New Zealand, the Islamophobes were absolutely outrageous about this. So we'll go through some of the inconsistencies on that issues as well. We'll also go through some of the condemnations, the fake crocodile tears and the condemnations put out by those Islamophobes regarding the Christchurch massacre. So let's begin. Although the tragedy of Christchurch was really, really bad and what took place was abhorrent, it was absolutely crazy. In one aspect, I don't know whether it's okay for me to say this, but I'm not saying it's a good thing that's happened in Christchurch, but it's a good example, I should say. Maybe that's better. It's a good example in a way to show at least a lesson to all the Islamophobes out there who constantly ridicule Islam and Muslims, saying you belong to a terrorist cult or a terrorist religion, that this lesson that we saw in Christchurch, which was done by a white supremacist, it shows that terrorism has no religion, it has no race, no colour, no ethnicity, it has no face. Anyone can do the act of terrorism. So if anything positive we can take from it is to at least show, let it bear witness that terrorism can be committed by anyone. That slogan, not every Muslim is a terrorist, but all terrorists, all terrorism is committed by Muslims. You know that slogan that we used to always, not all Muslims are terrorists, but all terrorists are Muslims. Or all terrorist actions are committed by Muslims. You know that saying. You know, the Islamophobes would say things like Muslim terrorists. They always reference the Quran. They say Allahu Akbar, so it must be done in the name of your religion. Muslim terrorists, that's what they do. They reference the Quran. But, you know, we could actually say that the far right terrorists also reference you. You know, they look at you, your color, your nation, your culture. They reference their own culture as the superior dominant race. So they reference you. Does that mean it represents you? Does it? Come on. Well, if Muslims say Allahu Akbar, therefore it represents the Quran, then a white terrorist who commits murder, he describes you. He references your culture as a superior race. Do we now blame your race as a whole heart? No, we don't. So why do you then try and tarnish Islam? Just because someone says Allahu Akbar and does it in Allah's name. As if Allah, as soon as he said Allahu Akbar, as if a word came from the heavens and said, yes, I agree with this atrocity. Condemnation, you know, we saw a few leaders here and there, you know, Netanyahu, whatever, writing a few tweets condemning. He didn't even say, you know, he gives his sympathy towards Muslims. He didn't explicitly use the word Muslim, but he did send his sympathies. But we never saw what they did in, you know, France with Charlie Hebdo. You know, we didn't see the march. You know, we didn't see them all hold hands, all the United Nations and the presidents. They didn't come, but, you know, when it happened in France, it was a different story. But look, nevertheless, they apparently condemned it. So do you want to believe their condemnation? It's up to you. But for me, I don't really believe it because they were very complicit in participating in their own Islamophobia. So I don't believe in their condemnations. And then we saw the egging of Fraser Anning. We saw him get egged by a boy called Egg Boy. That was pretty interesting. You know, a lot of the people on the right say, oh, look, you know, this boy was a little bit harsh. You know, he shouldn't have gone out and egged someone. You don't just egg someone because you disagree with them. And my response to that is, yes, you're right. It's inappropriate to egg somebody for their freedom of speech. However, it isn't inappropriate when you egg someone for the things that Anning has said. Here's another crocodile tears, Ben Shapiro. He's basically come out and condemned what has happened in Christchurch. He basically says it's heartbreaking. But I don't really buy into that also because this is the same person that played a major role in spreading Islamophobia and alienation of Muslims. In his video titled, "Is it a myth that Muslims are peaceful in a majority?" Ben Shapiro was trying to make the accusation, the claim, more correctly, that no, majority of Muslims are in fact the radicals. And I've actually did a video response to him. You can see below this video. And this is what I mean. You know, they're all coming out condemning, you know, the church, Christchurch massacre, but they are implicit in contributing to most of this Islamophobia and alienation and demonization of Muslims. So they really play a good role in being the devil's advocate. So in reality, it is people like Shapiro who encourage the demonizing of Muslims and majorities, which result into white supremacy wanting to go after and kill Muslims. And the excuses that follow, as soon as I'm pretty sure you follow the Daily Mail, news.com, most of those social media platforms and media outlets, whether it be the Telegraph or, the Australian, whatever it is, as soon as you see a post about Christchurch, you see all the Islamophobes. Very rarely you see condemnations. And if they do give a condemnation, they always give an excuse at the end, as if they're praying for the victims of the people who have died, but then they're really quickly to say, oh, look, this is why it happened. And so I put a list down, and we'll go through the list of some of the things that they actually say. And these are some of the reactions. An Islamophobe says, I give my condolences to the victims' families, but where is all the media reporting on all the church attacks? Another Islamophobe says, we should not resort to this, but I predict this would happen. Look at all the terrorist attacks done in Islam's name. Another Islamophobe writes, I'm not alarmed at what have happened, but what did you expect? People have a right to fear Islam. Beautiful. So because someone has a right to fear Islam, he goes and shoots and kills innocent men, women and children in the mosque. Can you believe this? Islamophobe says, I utterly oppose to any type of violence and strongly condemn it, but there is this growing fear in the community due to increased Muslim presence. These are the words of Senator Anning, similar to that. But I know Muslims will take advantage of the shooting, saying the attack was anti-Islam thing. That is not true. I won't give up my freedom to criticize Islam. People are saying that too. Islamophobe says, but I think it's a conspiracy in order to change the gun laws. Well, apparently this guy just did a conspiracy theory in order to change laws. Islamophobe, the government has announced funding to tighten up security around places of worship, but there are farmers in drought. But hey, there's 55 million for place of worship for fictional characters. So basically some of the Australian Islamophobes are saying that the Australian Constitution, the government, the President has announced, Peter Dutton, Scott Morrison, he's basically announced a $55 million package to upgrade security facilities around mosques, and not just mosques, but also churches and other places of worship. And the Islamophobes are saying, no, you can't do that. You can't spend your money there. It's wrong. We should be using the money for farmers. But as if they didn't know that the Australian government is actually funding farmers with about, I think, $5 to $10 billion. But no, 55 million is sticking in their face. I don't know. Do these Islamophobes or these fascists, are they a bit upset that there is going to be a security upgrade in these mosques? Are they a little bit nervous that maybe they are complicit? Maybe they are the ones that are radicalizing and want people like Brenton Tyrant to exist, so we can have another mosque massacre? I think that's what they want. They even went as far as to say that the mosque in New Zealand actually produced terrorists, and I've got a response article below this video. You can actually see that for yourself. And so it just continues this constant justification of this massacre committed by a white supremacist, and they sit here and say they condemn this. They condemn all of this while making all of these excuses. And it's interesting because they always point fingers at Muslims and say, oh, you Muslims don't condemn any of these terrorist acts. Where are all your Muslims condemning us? Where are all the protests? And then on another hand, you see how they play this, oh, look, we Westerners, we can teach you a lesson on how to condemn. But do you hear a pure, a real sensible, honest condemnation. Do you see that? No, you don't. It's always, yes, we condemn it, but this is why it happened. Or we can condemn it, but it's your fault. You should have behaved this way. Or yes, we do condemn it, but it's really a conspiracy theory and, Jacinta's trying to get her laws changed. I mean, come on, seriously. Yeah, and all you anti-immigrant, all the ones, those Islamophobes, they were all anti-immigrant. All these criminals are coming to Australia to change our way of life or to incite violence and turn into criminal gangs. Well, news for you, mate, news for you. One of your own, yes, a white person, went to New Zealand to commit one of the greatest acts of terror in another country to tarnish the reputation of another country. So much for dark brown people or Muslims coming to Australia to wreck your reputation, right? And then the denial card comes out, the denial. One comment says, Brenton Tarrant is a Muslim convert. He did this to gain sympathy for Muslims. They couldn't handle the fact that Jacinta was very, very sensitive about the issue. She was really, she was a true face of condolences, giving her utmost respect, her utmost sympathy towards Muslims. But hey, you know what? This was all part of a big plan. Apparently, Brenton Tarrant was a Muslim. And so my response to this is, yeah, right. I guess Senator Fraser Anning is also a Muslim revert, deliberately passing on derogatory comments in order to gain the sympathy for Muslims. Oh, but no, he's a true Muslim. It was interesting because constantly the media is put forward, and a lot of censorship is taking place surrounding the terrorist image. The New Zealand Prime Minister, I understand, Jacinta, she's trying to censor his face. From the media coverage, she doesn't want to really give him attention and so forth. I understand where she's coming from and what she's trying to do. She doesn't want to give him and his organisation any oxygen. So obviously she's trying to censor his image. But there are certain Islamophobes out there who are outside New Zealand, in Australia, and they're trying to also censor his image. And I found this really bizarre because, how many times, you constantly see a post and people are saying, we should censor his image. But I can assure you, folks, that if he was a Muslim or someone with brown skin, all those on the right would say, why is the media censoring his face? Let the world see the true face of terror and evil. This is what they would say, wouldn't they? But, when it's a white person, white complexion, someone that actually represents their own colour, it's like, oh, quick, censor it, hide it under the carpet. Don't let anyone see his face. So, we know where you are. We know what you're on. And then the Islamophobes went on accusing Jacinta for playing a role of integration and diversity. Wearing the hijab and consolidating the Muslims. So one comment actually says, why don't Muslims wear crosses to show support for the Christians massacred in Syria and Nigeria? I mean, notice it's not, they're never, it's very rarely that the Islamophobes are, saying, well-wishing Jacinta, oh, look, she's doing good, she's trying to show diversity. No, it's straight away, it's why aren't Muslims wearing crosses to show support to Christians massacred? It's always this diversion game. Well, my response to that could be Muslims may feel it's offensive to wear the murder weapon that killed Jesus. Or perhaps because you don't see every other person suggesting the ban on crosses in the West and abroad as much as we see Westerners calling for the ban of the hijab. So Jacinta wore it to prove diversity, solidarity in the face of fascists. And his comment's interesting by Ahmed Danish. He writes, white people pretend to care about Nigerians and Syrians. Now, isn't that hilarious? Wait until they come to your country as a refugee. They will be the first ones to be opposed. And that's just so true. You know, they never care about immigrants unless those immigrants are being physically persecuted by Muslims. And even if they're persecuted by Muslims, even if you bring them to Australia, then again they still oppose Middle Eastern immigration. And then they say, oh, we're not racist. You know, we're not racist. We just don't want Arab people in our country. Of course, they don't explicitly say Arab, well, some do, but most of them, especially in the media, they don't say it. But we know that they're talking about Arabs because the intake is coming from Arabia. So when they say we don't want immigration, what they're basically saying is we don't want Arabs in our country. That's what I call undercover racism. You know, they'll accuse Jacinta as wearing the symbol of oppression. Sounds so cool, doesn't it? It's the symbol of oppression. Yet these Islamophobes, they themselves within their culture, they wear something called a hoodie, which is actually the symbol of criminality. But it doesn't seem they care much about it. So just because some people may be forced to wear the hijab, it may be oppressing for them, it doesn't mean most of the Muslims out there don't do it by choice. And it's interesting because they always point to Iran and Saudi Arabia and they say, oh, it's mandatory to wear the hijab there. So it's a symbol of oppression. No, it's not. If you don't want to live in Iran or Saudi Arabia, leave. You're oppressing yourself by staying there. So if you reject the law, you just go elsewhere. Can you imagine I said, you know what, the Australian law is oppressing me because it doesn't allow polygamy. It's against the Constitution. Well, an Islamophobe would say, leave the country then. Go somewhere else. Go to a Muslim country where they allow it. If you think it's oppressive, then leave. But can you imagine I went and said about the secularists, I said, look, the secularists, the Constitution is a symbol of oppression. It doesn't allow polygamy. Or if someone wanted to walk butt naked in the secular West, what would the police do? The police would arrest that person, right? And they'd say, no, you need to put your underwear on. And imagine I turned around and said, the underwear is the symbol of oppression. Therefore, it must be banned. They basically can't handle the fact that Jacinta was showing what the diversity is. She was wearing the hijab up against the fascists who want to ban it for those Muslims. Now, it's interesting. On one hand, they say, oh, Saudi Arabia, Iran is forcing the hijab. On the other hand, you see the Westerners campaigning, the Islamophobes campaigning to remove it. So you have them against those forcing it on while they themselves are forcing it off. And then they want to act democratic and liberal. They never turn around and say, oh, look, if you're forced, then we're going to campaign hard to bring in a law that if you show signs that you're forced, then by law, you can get it removed, right? But they don't even say that, right? Regardless if you have made your own choice, whether you accept it or not, regardless, for an Islamophobe, it's got to be banned. And this is why it's hypocritical when they call themselves liberal Democrats. They aren't. They're fascists, Islamophobes, supremacists in nature. And just in case you're saying to me, oh, you're being too harsh, you're calling us supremacists. Well, you know what? You actually do believe that your Western culture is the quote-unquote superior culture. So don't give me this nonsense that you don't lean towards white supremacism and every other culture is inferior. And of course, when you point these facts to them, they start making fun of the attack, what happened in New Zealand. They've got this evil nature within them. And this is why we say they're complicit. It's an organisation. And so when you read derogatory comments posted on social media about New Zealand Christchurch Mosque Massacre, white fascist Islamophobes don't view Muslims as human beings. That's why they laugh, joke and mock Muslims who were victims in this tragedy. How else do you think Brenton Tarrant murdered those Muslims without remorse? Tarrant followers and sympathisers are much bigger than we think. Now and then they show their ugly faces in the comments. Just go through all the social media networks, through reporting on Christchurch, and you'll see them. They're not very hard to find. They're actually one of the top comments. They're always supported and liked by Westerners. And we know why these white supremacists are out there. We know the reasons why they are diverting the subject. And we know why they're really butthurt of the constant media attention that the media has given to New Zealand. We constantly hear the victim blaming, the making excuses, and ultimately making as if it's the Muslims' fault. That's why this is happening. They divert your attention to Islamic militant groups killing Christian minorities in order to take focus away from New Zealand. Because he's white supremacist who is from one of their own. They will even take it as far to say that the New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinta is overacting while sympathising with the victims' families, and for promoting inclusion and upholding the values of diversity. Yet those fascists, all they can do is underreact, play lip service in condemnation of the attack, yet none of them have come forward to meet the victims' families, nor has a single one of them, be it Pauline Hanson or Senator Fraser, offered to go visit Christchurch and lay down flowers to show that they really condemn these attacks as they say they do, which speaks volumes. So do not even believe in their fake condemnations. Their true nature is actually beautifully illustrated in the next verse of the Noble Quran. Allah says in Surah 3, 118, they wish you have hardship. Hatred has already appeared from their mouths, and what their breasts conceal is greater. We have certainly made clear to you the signs if you will use reason. And this is why you get comments like this. Here's a post: Christchurch massacre, alleged gunman sacks lawyer opts to represent himself. And you have a comment straight after. Every news media outlet out there that reports on Christchurch, it's always a comment such as, what about Mumbai 101? Innocent people were killed by Islamists. Not condemning this atrocity though. So they're always constantly diverting. They don't want you to talk about New Zealand. And that's why as a Muslim Dawah community, we need to keep talking about Christchurch. Just as they constantly bashed September 11 in our faces, now the tides have turned. Remind them that they have terrorism within their own races. They have terrorism within their own white privileges. They have terrorism, true face of evil, within their own religion, although people say he's not a Christian. But then again, I think to myself, well, sure, but didn't Jesus forgive him for his sins? Anyway, that's a subject for another day. But, this is another point, because they always like to instrumentally tie Islam with ISIS. How does it feel now that we could use this person and say, tie him to Christianity? Although he's made testimonies about just before, in his manifesto, just before he went out and killed those people, he blessed God. He blessed the Christians in the name of his Lord, God. He would go and study the Ottoman Empire versus the Christian Crusades. He would uphold the churches and get upset and angry why the mosques are taking over the churches. He would get upset that the Islamic culture will take over the white Christian culture. But of course, apparently this doesn't constitute him to be a Christian. Of course, we can quote passages of the Bible, 1 Samuel 15:3, Numbers 31, Luke 19:27, and where it instructs to kill men, women and children and slaughter those who don't accept him. But, I guess anyone can use any scripture to justify their position, and any interpretation is correct. True, apparently according to the Islamophobes, that the Quran is confusion. Any interpretation is a valid interpretation. But according to the Bible, only one interpretation is correct, and they're only the peaceful ones. Don't worry about the non-peaceful ones, where in the book of Deuteronomy it says, kill anyone who worships other gods. Hey, that's just the Old Testament. That's as if Jesus said, that's the Old Testament, that's the New Testament, that doesn't apply, this doesn't apply. This is the same Jesus that was responsible for giving these Christians the Old Testament. And in the New Testament, in Luke 19:27, Jesus says he will come back. In the book of Matthew 10:35, I believe it is, he will come back with a sword. He won't bring the peace, he'll bring the sword. There's another lady called Lizzie who works in, and I'll put a video link below this video. She actually says Jesus will come back with the sword, and this sword will be physical. He'll fight the persecutors. Isn't she a Christian too? She propagates Christianity. But then again, we could say all interpretations are correct, just as you say all interpretations in Islam are valid. Yeah? So the radical interpretation of the Bible is just as valid as the pacifist interpretation of the Bible. How does that feel? Getting back now on to Senator Fraser Anning, he made comments, derogatory comments, to say that the people that got killed in Christchurch, it was the Muslims' fault because of the immigration policy. But interestingly enough, Senator Fraser Anning makes a post, and he actually says that he's basically saying that the white South African farmers are being oppressed, and he says the world isn't talking about it. He's saying that they're being killed and raped by the black people. And so he narrates a story, and it's pretty graphic, so I don't want to narrate it to you. It's pretty much an atrocity that took place. I don't know whether this is true or it could be an unconfirmed report. Nevertheless, he's talking about an atrocity of a 3-year-old being gang raped by black African men, and this is all happening in South Africa. And he's saying that the white people are oppressed, they're a minority. He's saying, why isn't anyone talking about that? And so I wrote him a comment to show him that this is how it feels when you make derogatory comments to piss Muslims off and make it feel like it's their fault. So I basically said to him in a response, and I actually paraphrased exactly what he said to Muslims, and I used it against him in this case. So I said to him, quote, "I utterly oppose all forms of violence within our community, and I totally condemn the actions of that rapist murderer in South Africa. However, the real cause of bloodshed on this farm today is the immigration program, which allowed white fanatics to migrate to South Africa in the first place." That doesn't sound nice now, does it, Mr. Anning? Because that's what he said to Muslims. He said to Muslims those very same words to the victims of Christchurch. He said, "It is your fault. It is because of the immigration policy which allowed Muslim fanatics to migrate to New Zealand in the first place, which caused the death of those Muslims." The shoe's on the other foot now, isn't it, Mr. Anning? We'll go through this next comment, next post. The Sydney Morning Herald reports that the National Memorial Service is expected to attract numerous foreigners, including possibly Prince William from the UK. This is the New Zealand will hold a national memorial for those victims who died in the mosque attack in New Zealand. And you see in the comments, it's incredible. People are saying, "Enough already. When will it end? When will this story end? Come on, give it a rest." Look at this comment. "Oh my God, who the hell cares? When is this going to finish?" So the Islamophobes are so upset that it's getting reported constantly. The media is bombarding the up-to-date news. I mean, only a week has passed here. It's not like it's been months or 2 months. It's only been a week of media coverage to give updated information of some of the things that are happening in Christchurch, right? And none of these people will even give a damn if Muslims are being shamed here, right? But constantly, because a white person is being shamed, a white terrorist is being shamed, they're feeling frustrated. They're like, why are we constantly reporting this? And I can assure you, if this was September 11, they will be frustrated at the media why they are not reporting enough news about it. But when it's a Muslim attack, it's like, "Shut up, please, I've had enough, I don't want to hear about it anymore." And this one's pretty incredibly funny, as you've most likely heard. The New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinta wants to hold a royal commission into how this white supremacist escaped intelligence radar and committed the atrocity of what he did. And so the Prime Minister wants to hold a royal commission on how this happens to raise questions to better tighten security. I mean, look what some of the comments are saying. They're saying, "Well, I think she has overplayed the whole thing horribly. A royal commission into terrorism will be a good thing, depends on the terms reference set. Can we have one?" Look at another comment. It says, "I bet the Royal Commission report will be censored and jail time for reading it." Another comment says, "Why did she change laws, then launch a Royal Commission?" Another one says, "This is logical, of course. Certain doesn't surprise me." And another person says, "She has a doodle." It's like they're basically mocking her. Another comment says, "And then tell the people the lie is not the truth. Hang on, last week she was wearing a hijab." And so they're not really positive about her holding a royal commission. She said, another comment says, "She will use the opportunity to remove potential threats to her power." Paul says, I'm still waiting to see something intelligent out of New Zealand. So apparently it's not intelligent enough to hold a royal commission to find out the reasons why this person got away with committing such a crime. 50 people and injuring 50 more. I mean, notice everything that Jacinta does, it's sticking in their face. You know, she could fart rainbow and according to them, she farted poo. Now, just imagine a Muslim terrorist went out and blew a mosque, killing 50 worshippers. Then he went to another mosque, took out an AK-47, started shooting everyone, butchering them. And then he basically got arrested and the same procedure took place. And then the intelligence agencies turned around and said, oh, this man wasn't on our radar. Can you imagine what the Australian society would do? What they would say against the Australian intelligence agency? Would they say, oh, look, let's forget about a royal commission? I mean, would they really say that? They would go after them. Heads would be rolling, honestly. It'll be a total different standard. They'd say, how can this happen? We give so much money of our tax dollars to fund the Royal Commission. How could these people not do their job properly? How could this person not be on their radar? They'll accuse Scott Morrison, the president. I mean, I remember when in the UK, terrorist atrocities would happen. And they would blame the London mayor. They'll say, oh, look, it all happened under the nose of Sadiq Khan. Yeah, it all happened under the nose of Sadiq Khan. You know, we should arrest him. We should bring him to justice. We should get him to stand down for not protecting us. Yeah, they'll throw the book at him. They'll throw the shoes at him. Yeah, this is what they do. But why? Why now? Why is a royal commission unnecessary when Muslims are being killed in the mosque? And this proves the point. They themselves are complicit in radicalization. They themselves have got blood on their hands. They are all infected by the same evil brush. That is that the politicians have demonized Muslims, alienated Muslims so much that they have now become unhumanized. And so the non-Muslims are looking at the Muslims as if they're not even human anymore. What? Royal Commission? Come on, what a waste of time. Why? Because it was Muslims that have been killed in this atrocity. It was the Muslims who are victims of this atrocity. And then the next point is absolutely bizarre as well. As you know, Jacinta, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, she's cracking down even on the manifesto the criminal terrorist put forward before carrying out his crime. And believe it or not, even the Islamophobes and the Westerners are outraged that Jacinta, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, is putting a ban on the actual manifesto. And they're saying, oh, this is impinging on freedom of rights, freedom of expression. And I'm thinking to myself, whose side are the Islamophobes on? Whose side are these Westerners on? Are they on the side of the victims or are they on the side of the perpetrator? They're literally defending his manifesto as a freedom of expression, freedom of speech, even though that same terrorist manual actually instructs non-Muslims how to better kill Muslims in a mosque attack. It describes things such as, when you go and shoot people in the mosque, that make sure you shoot them while they're on the ground to make sure they're dead, because they could be playing dead, right? And so the manifesto speaks in this nature of hatred, of violence, of extremism, and this person carried out his attack promoting his manifesto. So his manifesto is linked with what he did at the church. He's basically putting an example. He's saying, this is how we destroy and remove Muslims. We speak about immigration. This is my book, this is my manual, and this is what you got to do. You got to go out and exterminate and kill them. But apparently this is freedom of expression. This is something that we need to read, we need to have. It's okay. Apparently this sort of propaganda is acceptable and it shouldn't be banned. And I'm not making this stuff up. You could see in the comments, this is the post from the Sydney Morning Herald, NZ bans Christchurch Terrorist Manifesto. And you can see here, Mesa Hamden says, freedom to speech stops when people incite hatred and bigotry. Well, she's against it. Here, this one here, JB says, this is getting ridiculous, even for Clown World. It says, and so it begins in New Zealand. Here, Jasmine Keller says, freedom of speech. No, not anymore. Wow, does she think she is the boss and above the law? And so this is the comments that you see. And I'm thinking to myself, can you imagine if we are arresting people with ISIS propaganda material on their hard drive, then the same standard should follow. Anyone who opposes this should be investigated as a potential fascist. We have terrorist laws that if you have ISIS propaganda material in your hard drive, then if that material teaches you how to make improvised bombs or tells you how to kill an infidel, that would be banned. I mean, you'll be arrested. But why? So why the double standard now? Why, when it comes to the propaganda and the jihadi material of a white fascist, why is that now acceptable under freedom of thought, freedom of expression? And that's why I'm thinking to myself, are these people really with the Muslims and the victims, or are they really with the perpetrator? And it shows that they're more inclined to being with the perpetrator, with the white supremacist, and being complicit in accepting his material and taking it as a source of knowledge, taking it as a source of inspiration. Because they basically want more attacks like this to occur. I mean, that's the only conclusion I can come to if you want to carry such a handbook. I've heard some Islamophobes say, it's your Quran is a terrorist manual. We don't put a ban on that. But notice they've actually conflated the two together, because there is no difference of opinion on the terrorist manual of this manifesto that this white supremacist has. We know in there it says to kill men, women, children, innocent lives, whoever of the Muslim faith. It is agreed upon, unlike the Quran, which is actually manipulated and misinterpreted by, again, Islamophobes and fascists and radical extremists, and there is a difference of opinion. Not all Muslims agree to the interpretation of ISIS. So conflating the Quran as a terrorist book of manual with white supremacy and this manifesto is incoherent, because not all Muslims believe that the Quran is interpreted in that particular interpretation. And there is no disagreement that his manifesto preaches terrorism. It seems that everything that this woman does is objectionable. Everything. But I'm pretty sure if she said, let's ban the Quran, they'll all be, yeah, let's support this. Yes, we should ban the Quran. Of course, yep, let's all do it. Yep, they'll praise Jacinta, right? But banning a terrorist book of this white supremacist, oh no, how could you do that? No, that's just unacceptable under freedom of speech. And finally, I want to touch on freedom of speech, freedom of expression. You know, these Islamophobes, Australian Islamophobes, they don't understand how freedom of speech and hate speech can be classified as unacceptable. Until you start insulting the Anzacs, of course. Right? You know, as soon as you talk about the Anzacs, oh, yep, that's not right. A critic actually responded to me and said, I think it's more of a case of say whatever you want, but be prepared to be challenged on it. My response to that is, it's a for you to say it's a matter of what you say, what you want to say, and be challenged. It's not really that simplified. An example, if a Muslim imam in Australia named Sheikh Ahmed said ban all churches in Australia, and then a Muslim went and bombed the church in Australia, everyone will say he was radicalized by Sheikh Imam Ahmed. So although Imam Sheikh Ahmed didn't explicitly say commit acts of violence, he still inspired intolerance. All Australians will then link this act of terror and blame the Sheikh for inspiring intolerance, thus breeding terrorism. He would be immediately demanded to step down from his position of authority and in fact shut down. His freedom of speech will be shut down as hate speech. See, folks, it's not a matter of what you say or what you want to say and be prepared to be challenged on it. It's a matter of, yes, say what you want, but what you say can have greater consequences than simply being challenged. You'll probably be fired from your job. You probably go to jail for inspiring hate, getting your visa cancelled, and the list goes on. A critic wrote back in a response to say, regarding Anzacs, it can be a sore point when ignorant fools make fallacious remarks about the Anzac Day. And so he wants to tone it down to say, oh, you know, it's just a fallacious remark, you know, it's just distasteful. But we know that it's not just a matter of being distasteful. Because when Yasmin Abdul Majid made comments on the Anzacs, yes, it was distasteful, but you demanded her to leave her position of authority. The poor lady had to run to the UK. She left Australia because her freedom of speech was not tolerated as, yes, we still respect you, but we disagree with you. No, it wasn't that. It was, you raghead, you camel herder. They insulted her with the most derogatory names, and they told her to stand down. So it's not as simple as you put it. It is the Muslims who face the consequences the most. And this is the hate speech that they want to be accepted. Jenny Hedson writes, good time for target practice. Yes, apparently Muslims are target practice. This is the victims. They're talking about the victims of Christchurch. Dave says, you Muslims can pack up your shit and F off back to your own rundown shitholes. These are apparently the freedom of... These are the hate speeches that we're supposed to accept. Wonder how many rapists are amongst them. Oh, that's right, we accept this from Islam. So apparently we're all rapists. Can you imagine? They're saying that we're all rapists. Can you imagine if the media said that? The media turned around and said, you're all rapists. What we have defamation laws in this country. You could get charged for that sort of speech. But apparently they want to make this mainstream. They want to make it acceptable. The things you see when you don't have a chain gun. Wow. Water balloons full of pig piss. Talking about Muslims. Wonder how many terrorists or child molesters there is. This is our country. If you don't like it, so they're all calling us child molesters. So this is apparently the freedom of speech we're supposed to accept from these people. Islam is a cult. Load all them up with buses and ship them out of Australia. Shame on Muslims community. You can get this amount of people to pray in the street, but you don't get any of the streets to condemn killing the rapes done by ISIS. Stripping Australian of its values one day at a time. So they want to strip us of our values. Where is a steamroller when you need one? So they want to roll us with steamrollers. Apparently this sort of hate speech is acceptable. Stampede them. Robert says, stampede them. Have a look. Stampede them. Ryan Mego says, why aren't there any suicide bombers or gunmen that attack these people? Really? They want suicide. People who commit suicide. They want more Brendan tyrants in Terrence to do more suicide attacks. Have a look. This is apparently the freedom of speech that we're supposed to tolerate. And don't be deceived, people. You see, I don't have a problem of you criticizing the Quran or asking questions about the Quran in a respectful manner. But there's a difference between that and the hate speech that you're reading here that they want to make mainstream. No, this isn't freedom of speech. This is hate speech, and we will never accept it, just as you don't accept us to insult the Anzacs. Thank you.